Okay, to be honest, I think the best course of action that you can take possibly is to skip the film, skip this review, and read an interview with Rob Sheridan, who saw the film while high on mushrooms. It is the best thing that's come out of this whole affair. It's hilarious, and if it wasn't plagiarism, I would just read it out loud here. I will link it in the description instead. If you're still interested in my personal take, let's try and do it properly. So, in order to try and begin to comprehend how this absolute train wreck came into existence, we have to go all the way back to the 1980s and the original Broadway musical. It is in that cocaine fueled decade that Cats made its debut, and even as a stage musical, on paper it makes zero sense at all. The screenplay is based on a series of loosely related poems about cats by T.S. Eliot, which means it's not really a coherent story. The whole thing is framed as a bunch of cats singing songs about themselves and their one single defining trait. And then in the musical and in the film, the best one gets to die and be reborn to a better life. Nonsense, I know. Now, as far as I've learned, according to Broadway fans, the musical isn't even that good. The premise is completely insane, and apparently the songs are not that great, and there are many other musicals that are way better than Cats in that regard. But for some reason, it's become a cultural phenomenon almost. It's become one of the longest running stage musicals in the history of Broadway. It made shitloads of money, and thousands of people saw it over the years, or actually decades. Why? Well, one comment I saw on the internet from an avid Broadway fan said this: I hate Cats as a concept, and I hate it as a musical, but I will forever be grateful to it for what it did to Broadway as a whole. And apparently what it did was mostly increase the scale of production. The costumes, the huge sets, the choreographies, the lighting. The creators of Cats just went all out. Cocaine, I guess. In any case, because it was so bombastic and huge and fucking weird, people went just to see the spectacle. Think about it. Wouldn't you go to see grown people running around on stage and dancing in cat ears and with whiskers, pretending to be cats next to giant chairs and tables and lampposts? And the people enjoyed it, I guess, and they kept coming, and to an extent, it also became a tourist attraction of sorts in New York. You visit the city, you go to see a Broadway show, you might very well pick Cats because by now it's become famous. That means people buy tickets over and over, and that means the producers pour more money into other productions as well, trying to replicate that success. So thanks to Cats, other musicals could suddenly operate on bigger budgets, which was good news for everyone. In any case, some time ago, some Hollywood producer had too much drugs and concocted the idea of making Cats into a feature film. You may think, okay, this may not be such a bad idea if you make it animated, and that was the original idea. However, for some incomprehensible reason, the creators abandoned it and decided to do it with real people. Okay, you may think they were gonna go the same route as the musical does, as the stage play does. Just slap some whiskers and cat ears on people and bit of makeup, some costumes, and call it a day. But that would be boring and reasonable, so instead they decided to go with CGI human-cat hybrids. And the result is fucking horrific. It looks like a radioactive bomb hit a town with people in full body cat costumes and somehow merged them into it, but a lot went wrong in the process. They all look like demons from hellish dimensions or like eldritch monstrosities from Lovecraft's prose, with the terrifying human faces kind of merged into the CGI fur bodies, with genitals removed, of course, completely like in Barbie dolls, with tails that move on their own and give people nightmares, and with hands and feet that sometimes look more human, sometimes more goblin, but definitely never like a cat. I mean, you can go watch the trailer and see for yourself, but in longer scenes where you can see many of those ungodly hellspawns at the same time, the effect is even more mentally scarring. Nothing about the character designs and executions was even close to a good idea. It's also not even consistent with itself. Some cats are, well, naked. Others wear shoes for some reason. Others wear pants or coats of fur. Whose fur is it, by the way? Have they murdered another cat and wear his skin as a trophy? Then there's the fat cat played by Rebel Wilson. Of course, the entire joke is that she is fat and she is clumsy, as in every single other film. She starts off like a naked cat with just her fur, but then at one point she unzips it. She unzips the fur and reveals another set of fur below it. What the fuck is this abomination? Then, when you think the film has gone overboard, she begins, in the same scene, she begins eating cockroaches with human faces. And this is all within the first 30 minutes of the film. And the cat goblins just keep showing up. Everyone is scarier than the last. Judi Dench, Ian McKellen, Idris Elba. Why are you in this? Have the producers kidnapped your kids and blackmailed you? Why are all those talented people in this fucking train wreck of a film? And speaking of Idris, he appears in a coat and hat throughout most of the film, but during his song towards the end, he finally removes it all, and it is something that I wish I could erase from my memory. He plays a dark brown cat with really short fur, and so he looks like what I would imagine to be a cross between a monkey and Satan. Enough about character design though. It's a musical, right? So probably they got the songs and the dance numbers right, at least. Well, not really. The songs are pretty forgettable, there's nothing amazing in the way they are sung, and a lot of them are just uncinematic because it's Judi Dench or Ian McKellen singing, and as you may imagine, they're not exactly going to dance or move around, so they just stand in one spot and sing, and you're forced to watch their mutated faces. The worst example of that is Memory, possibly the only memorable song in the whole bunch, that somehow was completely botched anyway. Jennifer Hudson sings it, and she's not moving either, for whatever reason, but she does get so emotional, in fact, not just during the song, but in each of her 3 scenes in the film, that 5 seconds in, she's got a running nose. I mean, there's like a huge line of disgusting snot running straight onto her lips, into her mouth. And not only is it disgusting, it's also distracting. I was so appalled by it, I could hardly focus on the song itself. And she also sings really quietly for most of the song, but then there's the big moment, there's the climax of the entire song and the film, where she just goes all out. But for some reason, the sound mixing is bad, and the instruments are turned up to 11, so you can barely hear her voice. What the fuck is up with that? I complained about the lack of movement in the songs, but there are actually songs in the film where there are huge dance numbers involving dozens of cat goblins. You'll ask about the choreography then, is it any good? The answer is, I have no idea because of the way the movie is shot and edited. So picture this. You have 20 dancers on the floor in a large hall and they start their number. There will be a wide shot of all of them for 2 seconds. Then a hard cut to a close-up of one of the characters. Then a hard cut to a close-up of someone else who is not even dancing but just watching from the sidelines, so a reaction shot. And then cut again to a camera in the middle of the floor rotating around. Rinse and repeat all the time. The result is that you can never really see what's going on. For all I know, the choreography is fantastic, but we never get to see it. What is the point then? What is the point of all that effort? Think. If you're watching Cats as a stage musical live, you get to see the entire stage all the time. The whole point of 20 people dancing together is that you can see them work together, harmonize their movements. The movie just removes that completely for no visible reason. Or maybe it was edited that way to hide the poor CGI, because several times in the scenes out on the streets, especially if you look closely, you can see that the CGI goblin bodies are not interacting with the environments quite right. Like you'll have feet sliding on the floor like it's an ice rink. It looks absolutely awful, and maybe the CGI was so unfinished in the wide shots that they just had to resort to cutting to close-ups all the time. And by the way, the CGI being unfinished is not just a baseless accusation on my part, it's a fact. The distributor has released a statement to the movie theaters after the opening weekend that they will be sending out updated version of the film with corrected effects. A day one patch for a film, something that never happened before. This is madness. I also want to say that I was kind of excited to go see Cats because it looked promising as an awful movie. And awful movies can be entertaining in their own way, but it wasn't even that. During some of the songs, I was literally falling asleep. It wasn't bad in a funny way, it was bad in a bad way. Unengaging, boring, poorly made, just tiring to watch. Finally, I want to mention the opening weekend in the US because it's the funniest thing about the whole affair. So the budget for the film was around $100 million. Plus you have to count in the marketing, and the trailer was everywhere and the posters were around. So probably somewhere around 150 million sounds realistic. This is the level of budget that only Avengers and Christopher Nolan get these days, by the way. It's fucking astronomical for a musical. And then the film was released in the US on the same weekend as Star Wars and Jumanji. What? Why would you do this? This is suicide. So, as may have been expected, it hasn't done very well. During the entire opening weekend, it made, on a budget of around $150 million, remember, $6 million. 6 million. It's a train wreck. It's a complete catastrophe. But looking at the context, what did they expect? Which brings me to my final theory, that the entire thing is nothing more than a money laundering scheme. I cannot see any other justification for the existence of this film. So, quick summary. Plot, non-existent. Songs, forgettable. CGI, absolutely fucking nightmarish. Dance choreography, who knows? Cats manages to be one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life. It would be better for everybody involved if it didn't exist. Do not go see it.